let's address this bigger picture question with the Cardinals. Are they tanking? Now, one thing we've learned from the NFL, and I've said this for a while now, the first rule of Tank Club is never talk about Tank Club. And they proved it with the Dolphins. Brian Flores, in a landmark lawsuit against the Dolphins, alleges in a complaint proffered to a court of competent jurisdiction by a lawyer, he alleges that Stephen Ross, the owner of the Miami Dolphins, during the 2019 season, offered him the hefty sum of $100,000 per game that he lost. And the NFL investigated, and the NFL concluded that it was a joke. It was said in jest. I continue to wait for the punchline for the joke. I know comedy is hard. In that context, comedy is impossible. There's no joke there. But the NFL does not want to ever have to acknowledge that one of its teams is not trying its best to win every single game. Excuse me. Because that's when you get Congress, you get prosecutors, you get a new agency that has power to regulate the NFL. You get all that stuff. If you do anything other than say our teams are always trying to win every single game, because now in an environment of legalized gambling, you got a big problem if you acknowledge what we all know happens from time to time. Because no matter how hard the NFL tries to ignore it, there is a bright line connection between being really bad during a given regular season and sitting in the best seat possible in the next draft. And as long as they do it that way, there's a temptation to just accept the fact that sometimes you just got to take your lumps. As I once heard Stephen Ross say in my presence, sometimes you just got to take your lumps. And this year, the Cardinals, and he wasn't joking then either. And if he was, it wasn't funny. The Cardinals are just taking their lumps. And we saw it in the draft when they started stockpiling picks for next year. And to me, the key was, Myles, and I got a lot of pushback from Cardinals fans who I think want to believe their team's going to try to win. When they cut DeAndre Hopkins right before June 1, and all they had to do was wait like 3 days and split the cap charge of $22 million between this year and next year, it would have been 11 and 11. They didn't do that. They took the full 22 this year. You get all that pushback. Look, it's simple, folks, and we saw it when Aaron Rodgers took a much lower cap number this year with the Jets, when he reduced his contract dramatically and created an extra $10 million in cap space that the Jets didn't think they'd have. Rodgers said, we've got the flexibility. If a good player becomes available, either at the final cuts or at the trade deadline, we can make a move. The Cardinals deliberately blocked themselves from even having that luxury. And if they ultimately didn't do it, that money carries over anyway. It's just keeping the money in your pocket instead of throwing it away until next year. That, to me, was the clearest sign they don't care about this year. This year, they know they're not going to be competitive. They know they're not going to be a playoff team. Now, I also see people in the media who will push back on the idea of tanking, Myles, by saying, well, the players are never going to try to lose. No, that's not the point. The players are always going to try to win. The organization puts players on the field who can't win. They're going to try their damnedest, but they're not good enough. When you choose between Josh Dobbs, who just got there, and a fifth-round rookie to be your week one starter, you are not putting players on the field who are good enough to compete and win games. And this year, I believe the Arizona Cardinals, number one, don't want to, and number two, will never admit that they don't want to.
Well, I mean, yeah, because if they admit that they don't want to, then they have real problems, as you just really, I think, did a good job of laying out there. So, look, I mean, when you're not going to have your starting quarterback for any period of time, any stretch of time, then that's going to be an issue in the first place. And when it comes to trying to win. Now, when you let go of the veteran quarterback who's been a backup, who's gone 3-3 as a starter over the last 2 seasons, granted it was a different coaching staff, but it's still, a record of whatever you want to call it there with Colt McCoy. then that also kind of does send the signal of like, wait a minute, what's going on here? You know, this is a guy that has been in the building throughout the entire offseason. He's been participating. He had to recover, I think, from some sort of arm issue, but still, he's been there. So he understands what the scheme is, what it's going to be. Right now, again, you know, you have a Tune who's been there throughout the offseason program too, but he is a 5th round pick. Dobbs is familiar with the offense because it comes from Drew Petzing, who was his quarterback's coach there in Cleveland for a time last year when Dobbs was still on the team. So it's not like they're unfamiliar with each other and he's unfamiliar with that scheme. But I think there's something to, and you wrote it this way, you know, if you're playing chess and one player has, you know, a full complement of pieces and the other team is playing, or the other player in chess is playing with just pawns, then like, you're not necessarily really playing chess. You're playing with a hand tied behind your back, at least. Then that's kind of what the Cardinals are kind of doing, but I understand it in a way because, again, they don't have their starting quarterback. And oh, by the way, if you look at what's coming down the pipe when it comes to, you know, a top pick overall from next year, you got guys like Caleb Williams, right? Who I think if the NFL had its druthers, that they would have been able to pick him number 1 overall this year over the 2 guys that came out of the draft, right? You know, if Caleb Williams maybe had his druthers, he would have come out in this year, but he can't because, you know, he only had 2 years done in college. So that's one. Drake May playing at UNC. It's another guy. So we don't know where this is going to end up for the Cardinals, and I hate talking draft when it's draft time. So like me saying this right now, like basically a year before it happens is weird. But at the same time, like if you are anybody with a long-term vision for the Cardinals, that's something that's got to be in the back of your mind somewhere. You know, how can we set ourselves up so that we are in a favorable position in 2024? And whether it's through salary and money and this and just playing with pawns, there is a way to manipulate things so that you are in that kind of position of strength heading into the 2024 offseason and draft.
Now, some would say, and Sean Payton, the coach of the Broncos, has said it on this program before when asked about how this tanking thing does or doesn't mess with your broader program objectives. He hates the idea of it because your foundation needs to be, we are always, in every circumstance, attempting to win.
Yes.
And you do an injustice to the men that you expect to go out there and try to win when you tie one hand behind their backs by virtue of the talent or lack thereof you put around them. So it's not something that is conducive to a long-term strategy and culture. It's a cultural thing.
It's not.
You do that and you lose guys in the locker room. But not every team gets it. There's plenty of teams out there that put the fun in dysfunction, and the Cardinals currently are one of them. I mean, the Texans have relinquished the title of the most dysfunctional football operation in football, at least for now. Most football, never mind. Speaking of dysfunction, let's see how many times I can say the word football in the same sentence. The Cardinals are now the most dysfunctional team, as evidenced by everything we've seen in the offseason, the ridiculous statement that they issued after Terry McDonough filed a grievance against the team. That was embarrassing, and it was unbecoming to the NFL and to the Cardinals. And it's just one thing after another, and the Jonathan Gannon tampering thing, and it's this and it's that. They are dysfunctional right now. I'm sorry, Michael Bidwell, you may not like to hear it, but somebody needs to tell you. And no one in your circle of people you pay a lot of money are going to tell you because they want to keep getting a lot of money. I don't care. I can be blunt with you. Your team is dysfunctional. So if you embark on this path, and it's probably too late to turn back now, but you're going to have a locker room that is poisoned by what happens this year. And you know what? It's an easy fix. Jonathan Gannon just gets fired after this year, like Steve Wilkes did after they did this in 2018, either deliberately or inadvertently, and got the pick that became Kyler Murray. You just tell Jonathan Gannon, get on down the highway, and we'll hire a new coach, and we'll bring in a new culture, and we'll have the first overall pick in the draft. And maybe we'll have the second overall pick in the draft because we got the Texans' first-round pick as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, whenever you cut a veteran quarterback who everybody thought was going to be the starter right before the season starts, and he's, been taking the first team reps, that's inherently dysfunctional, because it means that you don't really have a good enough plan for what your quarterback is. And that's, people call it the most important position in sports, especially in football, right? It's the most important position in football. So there's one thing, but like we can expand it to all sports, but they call it that for a reason. The quarterback's got to know every single thing that every single player on that field is trying to do at any given play. So if you have a veteran who's been in the league for a long time, who started for the organization, and he gets cut on the eve of the regular season starting, that is inherently dysfunctional. So yeah, I don't really know how else we can classify the Cardinals if it's not going to be that. I mean, the way they went about hiring their head coach was dysfunctional. They got dinged for a tampering violation. They self-reported it or whatever it was. But I mean, like, these things are things that are signs of a dysfunctional team. And until they get themselves out of it, that's what we're going to consider them. And I would say one other thing, we talk about this culture of losing, right? Ask the Cleveland Browns, that's why they had to get rid of Hugh Jackson in some ways, because all he did was preside over that culture of losing. And that may or may not have been his fault. There are different things that have gone out and whatever. But until they had a new coach, they had this just, mired in just crap. 1-31 was awful. And the team was set up to be that awful. And yeah, you got Myles Garrett out of it and you got Baker Mayfield, but like, man, you can't go on like that and try to actually establish a winning culture in the NFL. You don't establish a winning culture by losing. So yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned Hugh Jackson, because I think one of the most overlooked stories in recent years from the NFL was that after Hugh Jackson was fired by the Browns, he filed a grievance with the NFL, accusing the Browns of having a system in place to tank and then making him the scapegoat when the system they put in place led to the natural result of 1-31. And what Hugh Jackson pointed to was a 4-year plan that the Browns had that did not prioritize winning. Now, it didn't say it, but when you have coaches and executives who were getting bonuses based upon salary cap space that was carried over from one year to the next, based upon draft picks that were stockpiled in future years, objective indicators of a team not prioritizing winning now, and the league rubber stamped it. Why did the league rubber stamp it? We go back to the Stephen Ross was only joking when he offered Brian Flores 100 large for every loss. You can't tell the world in an environment of legalized gambling that you got teams that aren't trying to win. The Browns had a 4-year plan that put winning in the back seat, put factors conducive to losing at the forefront, and they thought that would unlock something magical in the future. And I think along the way, Myles, they realized the coach is going to lose the locker room at some point when they figure out what's going on. So, hey, we got to fire the coach. I mean, they come and go. Thank you, Hugh Jackson, heart emoji, and the Browns move on. And that's what the Cardinals will do. Just save that template, Cardinals social media team. Maybe by January, it'll be thank you, Jonathan Gannon, heart emoji, and off he goes too, because their culture has gone to crap as they've tanked in 2023. And I'm sorry, Cardinals fans. I know you want to be hopeful about the season, and who knows, crazier things have happened. Maybe the Cardinals are going to major league this thing, right? Maybe the Cardinals are going to pull like the Indians did. Yeah, Joe Boo's not getting a refill in Arizona this year, though, Myles.
Probably not. But, Mike, the thing about, setting your team up, for the future and whatever we want to call it, like, I don't know that it's the best thing. Because, look, in the NFL, we have a system in place where guys get drafted and they have 4-year contracts. So, really, if a coach comes in and the coach isn't winning within 3 years, then that's a problem. And, the coach is going to get fired. And the way it works, that makes sense to me. But you see every year that a team can hire somebody and then that person can start turning things around almost instantly. Like, look at what Brian Daboll did last year, for the New York Football Giants. it's not like you have to intentionally be bad in order to turn it around and be good. You know, Kevin O'Connell comes in and they make it to the playoffs. They win the division. Sean McVay in 2017, he comes in and I watched him turn that building around. So that's why this whole thing of, oh, well, you know, we have to do X, Y, and Z in order to do, you know, A, B, C in the end. Like that, I don't like that, because you really can turn things around quickly in the NFL. It does not take losing for a season or for 2 seasons to then say, oh, well, all right, now we can do that, and we can stack the blocks and we can do this and that. I mean, yeah, you know, we might have said that the Vikings were the worst, 13 win team of all time. And, you know, I guess some things bore that out in the postseason, but it's not like you can't develop a culture of winning in your first year of something. And I realize that I'm sort of undermining what I've said by pointing out the fact that Kyler Murray is their starting quarterback, the quarterback they paid last year. And yeah, he's not going to be ready, but you can still do things that can help you try to build those blocks of winning. And I think when you have a guy in Colt McCoy who was a part of that locker room before, and he understands what it takes to be a professional quarterback, and you replace him with either Joshua Dobbs or Clayton Tune, that's not a good signal to anybody.
But it's all going to be forgotten. Look, the Cardinals aren't going to make the playoffs anyway, so who cares if they're 7-10, 6-11, or 2-15? But if they get Caleb Williams out of this and he becomes the guy for the next 15 years, I mean, look at the Bengals. The same year that Stephen Ross was allegedly trying to lose and get in position to get the first pick, the Bengals did it naturally. They've perfected that craft before they got Joe Burrow. And then in comes Joe Burrow, and everything changes. It's the moment where the world changes for that franchise, and the Cardinals want them some of that, plain and simple. Yeah. And it's tempting to go try to get it, even if it causes short-term havoc for your team to the point where you have to eventually fire your coach because none of the players want to play for him anymore because they know he presided over a blatant effort to not win games in 2023. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.